Welcome back, and thank you for staying with NTV Weekend Edition. On Talk of the Nation tonight, we know that with the onset of a new season of rains, there are concerns in the construction sector whether building standards will be upheld to ensure that there is no more collapsing buildings and flooded roads like we have seen in the recent past. So tonight we have Dr Isaac Mutenyu, who's the president of the Engineers Registration Board, to speak to us on the progress that has so far been met. Welcome to Talk of the Nation tonight.
Thank you very much, Sandra, and thank you for hosting me tonight.
Well, with the onset of the rainy season usually marks the start of collapsing buildings here and there, and that has been a concern of many people. What is the board doing about that?
Well, maybe to start with a correction. The chairman of the Engineers Registration Board, not the president.
All right.
And in the engineering fraternity, we have two key agencies. There's the Engineers Registration Board, which is headed by the chairman, and then there's the Uganda Institution of Professional Engineers, which is headed by a president. So I'm here in the capacity of the chairman of the Engineers Registration Board. The board, I think it's good for our viewers to understand the purpose of the board. The board is a statutory body of government whose responsibility is to regulate engineering practice. So our responsibility is to ensure that the public who take up the services of the engineers have the people who have got the required skills to do the work of engineering, and also to make sure that the government gets the best advice in terms of engineering. So there are cases, like you're saying, seasons like this where there's a lot of rainfall that cause a lot of risk to infrastructure and also to other technologies that are done by engineers. So what the board does, and it does this on a continuous basis, to make sure that we maintain a register of engineers who are certified or licensed and have got the capacity to do the work that is supposed to be done. Because then our understanding is that those engineers who are doing that work are able to, build or develop schemes that are resistant to, cases of natural hazards like floods. So that's what we do to guarantee to the public that we've got people who are certified and have the skill to do the job.
And as we plan for the newer season, just to pick your thoughts exactly, what are those things you're doing on ground for the bigger projects, for instance, in the private and public sector? What are you doing to ensure we don't have bad scenarios where people lose their lives and buildings collapse?
Well, we have big projects now that are being done by the government and the private sector. I think the first thing is to ensure that the standards that are set up by the government, because in all the engineering projects, all the work that we do, there are building standards for buildings, there are standards for public buildings, there are standards for roads, and so on and so forth. So we ensure that those standards are actually applied on ground. Because there's one thing having the standards, then there's another thing applying them on the ground. So we ensure that is done. And we have, I told you about the sister agents of the Uganda Institute of Professional Engineers, who have got, they've got branches, and on a routine basis, they keep checking the works that are being on site, just to confirm, one, that those people who are engaged as experts to the job are indeed experts, and then two, that those standards that they are supposed to apply are applied on ground.
We recently saw the board publishing a list of registered engineers for 2021, but from our previous conversation, you said those are the ones that the public should not work with. We just want you to give us more details on that, on the list that you published.
Yeah, we maintain a register, okay? And that register actually is published annually in the Uganda Gazette. And that register has those engineers that are licensed to practice engineering. Currently, we have a register, I think, of about 1,300, I think. Those are the ones supposed to practice. But we do understand that because of the limited numbers, the public goes out and engages those people who are not licensed. Now, there's a very big risk on that, because the public, if you engage an engineer who is not registered and you get into trouble, it is very hard for you to get help. So what we do, we maintain that, but we also are required to remove from the register those that are not compliant. Okay? And
when you say they're not compliant, what do you mean? Are they doing things? What exactly are they doing?
No, there are a number of things. One is those engineers must certify the board that they are in practice. They must have a valid license, okay, because we issue annual licenses. They must, of course, also satisfy the board by paying the dues that they're supposed to. Okay? So if they don't comply in those regards, we keep warning them. Like, you're supposed to do some continuous professional development courses. You're supposed to, continue practicing. Now, if they don't certify, then we are required to remove them from the register, because then our understanding is that they are not as competent as they were when we registered them. So we remove them. So we now also inform the public through publishing in the media that the following people are going to be deleted from the register. And that helps the public not to engage them in further engineering practice. Yeah.
So one, they have to carry on refresher courses in order to stay within the board. But also, like you had earlier mentioned, for one to be part of the board, they need to have been in practice for about 4 years, is it?
Yeah,
that's
the new entrant. Because engineering is a very practical, it's a very practical profession. You must do things. So for the new entrants, people who graduate with an engineering degree are required to take 4 years.
Yes.
Call it internship if you like. It's like an internship. They take 4 years practicing. And during that practicing, they must be supervised by a registered engineer. In other words, it's like some kind of mentorship.
Yes.
Now, after the 4 years, okay, equipped with their degree, equipped with the evidence that they've been supervised by a qualified registered engineer, equipped with the experience that they have attained during the 4 years, then they apply to be registered. And registration means they are now certified and passed out to do the work by themselves as professionals.
And maybe briefly for the viewers watching us tonight, someone may be wondering how, if I want to construct a house today or I have a project that I want to get into, how do I identify, a good engineer from a quack one? How do you do that?
I think that's a very interesting one. Actually, I think, unfortunately, the public, I think many members of the public employ engineers who are not registered. Okay? So there are things you can do. The Engineers Registration Board has got a website.
Yes.
And that website has the list of all engineers. So one thing to do is check on the website, find out the engineers, and on the website it tells you, because there are so many kinds of engineering. There are those who are civil engineers who build houses, bridges, and so on. There are electrical engineers, and so on and so forth. So the best thing is check on the website and then find out those that are qualified. Okay? But for work of engineers, it's always very good to get a reference. Okay? You can get reference from a friend. You can get reference from the Institution of Engineers I told you about. You can get reference from even the board itself. Okay? Even the Gazette, if you buy the Uganda Gazette, we publish on an annual basis. You can get details of engineers in there. And the public should always, okay, if you want an engineer to do for a job, you should always ask for the license. A person who does not have a license is not licensed to do for your work. Okay, so there's getting the person on the website or the register, but there's also asking the person, can I have a look at your license? Yeah, because without a license, as I said earlier on, it is, once you get into trouble with that person, it will be very difficult for you to get redress, because even the board will disown the person. Yes. The board only authorizes registered engineers to do the work. So if you get into trouble with the person who is not on that register, then you are in very big
Are there any measures that you're putting in place to at least save the public from the quack engineers? Are there any efforts that you're doing currently? It could be sensitization of the masses as well.
We are going into a drive of sensitizing the public, because we have understood that people don't know very much about the board. So we have prepared a strategic plan which we are going to launch on the Engineering Day, which is coming on 4th March. And in here we have a number of things. You know, we are doing sensitization to the public. We are going to be having cases where we keep publishing, telling people who the engineers who are qualified to do work for them. And I would advise the public, if they tune in or in all media houses on the 4th of March, that is the World Engineering Day, we shall share a number of things that we are planning as the board to do in the coming 5 years.
More details, maybe just give us more details on the Engineers Day that is coming on the 4th of March.
Yeah,
you'll be sensitizing the masses on different media platforms. And
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, the World Engineering Day is celebrated worldwide on the 4th of March, and it was proclaimed by UNESCO in its 40th General Assembly, I think, which was in 2019. So it is a day that has been put aside to make the public understand the contribution of engineering. Because if you look around, even in this studio, everything you see is almost engineering, but people haven't taken much interest. So that day is put there specifically to provide that opportunity for making people understand. So on that day, we shall be, you know, sensitizing public. We shall be looking out for all the engineers. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we shall not have it will be more few people.
Virtual.
Exactly, it will be more virtual than practice. So I would like to advise the public on 4th March, we shall start a program in the morning, maybe I think at about 9 o'clock, and go on up to about 3 o'clock. It is very good for people to tune in, and then they will understand many of the things that we do as the board.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Isaac Mutenyu, who is the chairman of the Engineers Registration Board, joining us today on Talk of the Nation and speaking to us about the Engineers Day that you should definitely look out for to get all the details on if the day ever comes and you want to construct or get into a big project, who do you run to and who do you trust? Thank you all for joining us. NTV Weekend Edition will continue shortly, so do not go away.